Mhm. And right off the rip live, it's another episode of Behind the Glass Sports from various locations across the eastern portion of the continental United States. Hardy Graham joins us from Mobile, Alabama, the pride of the Gulf Coast, as per usual. And Will Miller is somewhere in a college apartment in Tuscaloosa, hopefully not breathing in an overly excessive amount of mold. I myself find myself navigating heinously dense traffic in downtown Bladensburg, Maryland, leaving lacrosse conditioning, and we are here to bring you the news from behind the glass. Gentlemen, how's the evening going?
Uh, Things are going well. Aside from having to worry about Alabama football every single weekend, it's overall, no hurricanes out in the Gulf right now, so no worries at this moment in time. But other than that, things could not be going better.
It's good. Saints Broncos tomorrow, which Hardy will be there, obviously. I'm looking
Yes, I will
forward to
be in the
that.
Superdome for that one.
Yeah, Thursday night
Expect a
football in the
expect a
dome.
full BTG account takeover from them.
Oh yeah, that'll be something. Rest is good. I was at the players availability yesterday over at the Hank Crisp practice facility, um, where it was very eventful. But aside from that, yeah, it's all business. And I will be in Knoxville this weekend for the game. So excited about that and seeing what's in store.
So tell me about what was eventful about player availability this week,
Oh,
Will.
I'm so glad you asked. Well, without naming names, one media member previously thought, what's the term I'm looking for here? No longer in the picture, reemerged and tried to start a fight with another one. So that
Oh,
definitely happened.
Is this the YouTube guys spillover?
The guy the YouTube guy got rid of back in May.
Okay.
So
And
that
came
definitely
into the
happened.
facility in a professional environment to attempt to engage in a physical altercation over the matter.
That is essentially it. The actual YouTube guy, as I understand it, is no longer in the picture either. But so he was not part of this, but nor was he even present. It was another party. But player wise, I got to talk to Jalen Milrow, and I think he's just really dialed in. Um, I asked him a few things about Neyland Stadium and the environment. What the energy was he expected based on his experience being present in the stadium 2 years ago, as I also was, and how he wants to prepare for it. And really, he hit on the same things, over and over again, which is just more about control what you can control and just let your preparation do the talking. Tim Smith was far more candid on the matter. He said that if others want to trash talk him, that means, and he did say this directly, that he's been kicking your ass all game. So different schools of
fair
thought,
enough.
different perspectives, but you can hear it
That
all
that
at the
is
Hank Chris practice
100%
facility.
factual.
Yeah. And well, that's just a complete different mindset in terms of offense versus defensive guys. Just that kind of mentality on either side of the ball definitely carries over to some of those interviews.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And Tim was having some fun. Jalen Milrow, he's been through the
Yeah, he's all business.
school of media since
Yeah,
last year in this quarterback competition that was going on at that time, which honestly, guys, feels like a lifetime ago.
yeah, it
Um,
does.
but I think that both guys in their own way are ready for this game. I think they want to close the book on the last couple weeks. Obviously, we broke down, you and I, Hardy, the Vanderbilt game last week. Um, we have a lot to talk about this week as it pertains to the South Carolina game that took place last Saturday. And we'll obviously preview the game in Knoxville this week. But I think the players want to go out and make a statement in that game to kind of turn the page on what's been going on over in the month of October.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
what does a statement
definitely.
look like, though? What is.
Uh, a statement at this point just means going up to Knoxville and just playing a complete game. Not making all of the mental mistakes, not not protecting the quarterback, not allowing the SEC sack leader to just run free on what seemed like half of the snaps he was on the field. This Tennessee defense for next weekend, when we think of Tennessee, we think of Josh Heupel, the really high-powered offense, that we saw with Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, and then Joe Milton to some degree last year. But this Tennessee team is built a little bit different. They're really heavily reliant on their defense. When they went over to Norman, Oklahoma, and they just completely controlled the pace of the game, forcing turnovers, keeping that Oklahoma offense off the field. It's going to be really important for Alabama to maintain a consistent level of offensive play, not allow that Tennessee defense and that crowd to kind of get in their heads, because once they do, if they start making mistakes, then that defense will be able to jump on you. They'll be able to pin their ears back and just really come after Jalen Milroe. And I think establishing a run game, not just from Milroe, but from the running backs as well, is going to be really important for maintaining the pace of this game.
I think a lot of the issues this team has faced can be traced back to the second quarter and onwards of the Georgia game. You've seen the defense being unable to get off the field. You've seen the running backs really not be heavily involved in the game. You've seen, some struggles with Jalen Milroe in the passing game, and some pressure on him, courtesy of the opposing defenses. That's to be expected. This is the SEC.
Yeah.
But to me, the issues, they really came to a head against Vanderbilt, but a lot of them were still present last week. The penalties weren't as bad last week. It was like, for example, third down and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like South Carolina had that one drive of getting 5 third down conversions, which, that's efficiency if you're them. So, but
yeah.
They do practice doing that to us, just like we practice stopping them. But at the same time, you have to eventually, like, schematically is fine and everything, but eventually the amount of talent on the roster just needs to win some one-on-one matchups.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and I think that's where part of it is. You're seeing some guys get beat that maybe, and with South Carolina, there's only the one guy, right? All respect to the other players on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to pressuring Jalen Milroe, and offensively they got some threats. They got Rocket Sanders, Nick Harbor. They and our good friend of the show, Robbie Ashford. So that's pretty funny, but not as top to bottom, just a juggernaut of a football roster as compared to Alabama, and yet Alabama had to throw the kitchen sink at them to win. And South Carolina's played well. We could argue they should have beaten LSU. A down to the wire coin flip of a game. Seems like earlier in the season, after South Carolina just drubbed a Kentucky team that I think is pretty bad. But and Tennessee hasn't been the best either. But even in losing, they've held the last 2 opponents to under 20 points. So there is that. You got 19 and 7. You have 19 and 17, and I think that's pretty good. I think the Tennessee defense is pretty good, and obviously Nico's a stud. So there will be a lot of challenges. I don't think that, and I certainly think they'll be amped up a little bit for this upcoming game. No question about it.
Yeah. So, like, what is Hardy? I'm sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, just taking a look at the game this past weekend, there were really 2 drives that stood out in terms of South Carolina being able to maintain an offensive drive throughout, however many plays down the field. There was the really long drive right before halftime that got South Carolina's points on the board, and then the drive immediately coming out of the third quarter. Other than that, it was really just Alabama shooting themselves in the foot and giving South Carolina really more than they're even asking for on terms of defense. Jalen Milroe throwing the pick to set them up in really favorable field position, giving them 2 points on the safety. It's just some of these things that mentally you have to be able to fix. I thought other than that, the defense played fairly well overall. Got a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and that's going to be a really key point to this weekend, because as talented as Nico is, he is a very young quarterback. And when you have young quarterbacks, you want to get in their face, bring them some pressure, force them to make decisions quickly. Going to need some of this defensive front to really step up. I imagine, for better or for worse, Kane Womack is going to leave some of these defensive backs in one-on-one situations quite a bit this game. Because if you just allow those guys to sit back in zone all day and play with the Tennessee offensive line that's been really, really good through this point in the season, then it gives you a real shot to just get burned for Nico to just pick apart your defense down the field. And so you're going to have to find ways to get to Nico, definitely cause him some problems, get them behind the sticks, especially in the early down situations.
So what do we think? Let's say Alabama's able to do the things they need to do to beat Tennessee. They're able to win the one-on-one matchups with the DBs. They're able to contain the running game, and they're able to go out there and score points themselves. Let's say they do all of those things. They've had a struggle win against South Carolina, and they had what we can essentially call a struggle win against Georgia. I almost don't even, with everything that's transpired, feel good about that win anymore because of the collapse in the second half. What is feeling good? What is a good win? What does feeling reassured about the team look like?
In this specific case, and Hardy mentioned playing a complete game, which they'll need to do, but in this road environment and against a team that, maybe they haven't played up to their maximum potential the last two games. Obviously, neither has Alabama. Same boat there. Winning it is your bar right now, and that would be good. A lot of fans earmarked this game for a slip up potentially. The one that actually happened, they did not have even in 1,000 years. But such is the way of the sport now. But I digress. I think that a win here and you feel good. And if you win by a couple of possessions, you feel even better because it does mean that you played close to perfectly. Now, will that happen? Who knows? I did see the line yesterday was Alabama 2.5, which was very strange to me, considering the location of the game. You normally would think the home and road environment would swing things by maybe about that margin on the face of it, 3 points of possession. And at least in my my non-expert opinion, but I'm not over in Vegas. But I think that if you win, you feel good about the game. And obviously if you win ugly, an ugly win is still a win.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And this past weekend, we saw Florida go up to Knoxville, play in a really, really tough, late night environment. Alabama will be playing them at 2:30, so it's going to be a little bit different. The stadium will still be rocking, but it will not be a 6 p.m. kickoff like the Gators had to deal with. And if you watched any of that game from last weekend, you saw some really good things that DJ Lagway did to kind of pick apart that Tennessee defense. Graham Mertz suffering the ACL injury kind of forced Lagway to probably be out there maybe even more than Billy Napier was really comfortable with. Of course, he made a couple of mistakes early on, but they were up 14-0 in that game. Tennessee was able to force a turnover or two here and there and get right back into it. And that's something that with Milroe, who threw 2 picks this past weekend, one of them being kind of egregious, the other one more of a better play by the defensive back. It's going to be really important that he takes care of the ball, because if you allow Tennessee to get the ball in the Alabama field of possession, then it's just going to make things easier for them. They want to win this game just as much, if not more, than Alabama does. 2 years ago, they broke the however many year-long streak of Bama just going up to Knoxville and just absolutely beating the brakes off of them. And last year, Alabama was able to come back out and erase a 21-point deficit, take the lead back. And really from that point, the second half of that game, moving on for the rest of the season, Alabama was a completely different football team, if you guys remember. So this is going to be a really big turning point for either team, depending on who comes out of it alive. Both of these offenses have struggled, but it's going to be really important to, again, maintain just a level of consistency on both sides of the ball and not allow the other team to really dig deep into their bag, because they're going to pull out all the stops to try to win this game.
I stated last week that I wasn't worried about the Alabama offense because in the 17 full minute time of possession window against Vanderbilt, they were able to score 35 points. This past week it was only 27. I didn't see what the time was, but it felt to me as though there were more opportunities at hand simply that they didn't capitalize on, but also just foolish mistakes, like whatever that play calling business was at the end of the first half. I'm not sure they would do that again. And if they would, I would not suggest that myself. But you had other moments in the game, but you did enough to win. And I think in a game like that, that's not the barometer for did we succeed in the game if you're looking at it from a fan's perspective. But at the same time, you've still got a pulse in this conference picture. The SEC so wide open right now. Texas the only undefeated team, and everybody else with at least one loss. Ole Miss. That's why you don't lose to Kentucky.
Yeah.
But
because
you're still in it, and if you can win this weekend, like I said, and one of those games that maybe people had earmarked for you to, stumble with this new coaching staff and system, given what it is and what happened last time in that stadium, I would go so far as to say you're back to feeling good like before. Maybe not as good as before, but you're breathing much easier than maybe you are at this exact second.
All right, and you also kind of have to wonder, like, if you're an Alabama fan, is there anything that makes you breathe easy at all ever again this season? Because with the struggle win against South Carolina and the loss to Vanderbilt, there is no margin for error. Because of what you're saying, Will, the conference is such a tight race right now that no matter how badly you beat Tennessee and no matter how badly you dominate people the rest of the season, it's still a matter of what's your record, and you have no breathing room anymore.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Dropping a game to Vanderbilt, right now, you can make a real argument if you want that they could be sitting at 6-0 right now. Had a real shot to win against Missouri. Really just kind of blew that game freakishly late against Georgia State. And not
Turner
this Saturday.
Field claims another victim.
It does. It claimed a lot of brave seasons, but most notably the Vanderbilt Commodores this season. But I mean, funny enough, Texas has to travel up to First Bank Stadium in 2 Saturdays. So who knows? Maybe Clark Leary's able to dial up another number 1 win. That would be crazy.
He will probably be gone from there by the ensuing Monday if he did that.
I was about to say, how many Brinks trucks would Ohio State be backing up to his house?
Yeah, I mean, really. Yeah, it may not even have to be Ohio State.
Maybe it could. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of programs that are on the lookout for a coach like that. And if
who knows what Michigan's situation is going to be with all this?
Yeah,
all these incidents going on.
You gotta give that guy 7 minutes of separation from the mess that he took over. I hear you, Will. I completely hear you, and I think that might be how it plays out.
But who knows if he wasn't part of the mess? That's what I'm saying. And I'm not implying.
Well, no, you're absolutely right.
Out loud,
yeah, but I think until there's been enough time to step away from all that and see if things continue, I think it's hard to I don't know. There's only so involved you could really say he was, because Jim Harbaugh, the way things were left when he left Michigan, it doesn't really seem like anybody else was really in on too much of what Jim's grand plan was. Doesn't seem like he was doing much to develop the quarterbacks. Doesn't seem like he was doing much to get, other than giving guys playing time, a lot of these guys ready to go for this next season. Maybe there was some recruiting oversights because he's kind of thinking he's punching out soon. I don't know, but something happened here, and he did not leave the golden goose that he made it seem like he was leaving.
Yeah, definitely the case. You brought some guys back, especially on that defensive side of the ball, that you kind of expected to lean on a lot of this season in terms of Michigan. Alex Orgy, I believe his name, is really
You're tuning into
struggled.
the show without context. No, that's not made up.
Yeah, taking over
He's been bad.
Orgy.
He's been
Yeah,
pretty
he's
bad.
really strong. But the thing about the Michigan team's past couple of seasons is they've really relied on Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards to run the ball. Donovan Edwards has not lived up to the cover of College Football 25 that, he when the game came out, he was like one of the highest rated running backs in the game. I don't want to use video game ratings to evaluate a player, but he hasn't lived up to exactly what he was going to be coming into this season. So just moving forward from what last season was, and it was kind of I don't want to say a miracle run because they really did beat everybody they played, but just kind of a one-off type of situation that they finally were able to break through after the consecutive first-round playoff losses. And looking back at it, sometimes that's just what happens. I mean, we saw what LSU did after 2019. They were not a great football team. Sometimes the pieces just kind of line up, and I think that's kind of what happened with Harbaugh last year.
Well,
You're
we're
right. We
evaluating
should.
top teams. Go ahead, Aiden.
Well, I was just going to say that maybe we should say that that's usually how it goes, because the truth of the matter is that
To
the
be fair, it is
dynasty.
usually how.
Yeah, I mean, like that's usually how you win a national championship. Is you capitalize on a 3-year window damn well, and then you spend 10 more years clinging to trying to get back.
Yeah, that's more than fair.
We're evaluating top teams. Yeah, I don't think Michigan's going to get back there in the immediate future. A lot of waters to wade through. But let's talk
And they're
about
all cold.
right. Yes, they are. They are freezing up there in the Great Lakes region. But
A little
let's
chilly.
talk about another game involving top programs. That being a rare true road test for Georgia against a team that is actually good. Georgia versus Texas, one of the most anticipated SEC games of the season. If you're a Texas fan that holds season tickets, you've had this thing on the calendar. I don't think Georgia
Since they
comes away
announced
with
that you
this.
were going to be joining the SEC, probably.
Yeah, I don't think Georgia comes away with this game. I don't. I just don't see any of the things in this game, the intangibles about this game, working in Georgia's favor. And if Georgia is suffering a second loss, where does that leave everybody else? Not named Texas A&M, that's kind of sitting pretty right now. Who would have even thought? Texas and Texas A&M tickets are $1,400 right now, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking that if it ends up being that they're both in their current position right now, Texas in pole position, A&M with the one loss, that may be a bargain price over at Kyle Field in late November. But
Yeah,
what do you guys think
that's
about?
going to be
Yeah,
good for the
that'll be a
culture.
fantastic game.
Yeah,
that's going to be fun.
But just looking at that game, if Georgia were to perhaps lose this game and have the 2 losses coming out, I believe they would be looked at more favorably probably than any other 2-loss team in the country in terms of if they get into the playoff or not. Their 2 losses came at Bryant-Denny Stadium and what is it? It's not. I can't remember the Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium, wherever Texas plays. But you're playing again 2 of the top teams in college football. Both teams that made the playoff last year. Both teams expecting to be back in the playoffs this season. If Georgia slips up, it would be picking 2 great spots to slip up. It's different than an Ole Miss losing to Kentucky or an Alabama losing to Vanderbilt. It doesn't give you nearly as much wiggle room, especially when it comes to guys sitting in a conference room in early December trying to figure out what teams are going to be back into the playoff. And when you look at it, Georgia could definitely get that, the old, Bama bump when it comes to these type of things in terms of they've won 2 of the last 3 national championships. They almost came back and beat Alabama. As long as they play as long as Texas doesn't really just beat the brakes off of them, these 2 losses, while they do hurt them, it does still leave Georgia in a position to make the college football playoff. And I think when the rankings come out, whenever the first set comes out in early November, then Georgia will be looked on very favorably.
Come out on election day.
That's just awesome.
I just don't think they should, though.
November
I don't think they should.
Do not go on Twitter that day.
Well, Aiden, if you don't think they should, then I mean, were you part of the coalition of Alabama fans that thought Alabama should make the playoffs with 2 losses after losing to LSU and Tennessee?
No, I
Because
actually don't seem to recall being.
I was genuinely asking. I was not one of the people. I thought TCU should have gotten into that.
Well, and this
playoff.
is probably something we discussed on the Sunday Spin. I can't remember, but I'm sure we had this conversation. Whereas yes, I did think that they were probably one of the 4 best teams, but they should not have been put in because they had 2 losses. That's where I was at on that.
Yeah, and I agree.
And I think that if there's a fear of watering down the product because of a 12-team playoff, and yes, you're absolutely right, Marty. If there's a 2-loss team that should be in the playoff, maybe even in a 4-team format, it would be a Georgia team with losses to Alabama and Texas on the road. But at the same time, in the first year of this new format, we gave up so much to finally say, fine, this is it. It's going to be the teams it should be. And we put 2-loss team in the first season. I don't like it.
Well, I think when you look up in December, there's a real possibility that half the teams in the field have 2 losses.
You're right.
The way that the parity is increased in college football, it's everyone really has a shot to beat everyone more so than ever. You still have guys using the last COVID year. Cam Rising may come back for an 8th season of college football. He got another medical red shirt. So who knows? Whoever the quarterback was, Max Johnson, he got hurt at UNC at the beginning of the season. He could very well come back for another year of college football. I mean, you have guys that have a lot of college football experience still playing. Any given Saturday, someone could come out and, play the best game of their life against a top 10, top 25 team. And it really makes a difference, first of all, for building programs, but also for just increasing the enjoyment that we get around college football.
Absolutely.
You just can't help but feel for North Carolina, man. Everything that program going through this season. I mean, I don't have anything else that, fluff that out. I mean, it's just been a terrible year for those kids and their coaching staff and their families. I mean, I feel for them.
Now this is something that should probably be a conversation, but there are a lot of universities in Western North Carolina and other parts of the country that have been affected by some major and back-to-back natural disasters. And I'm not saying that we need some sweeping thing like the COVID eligibility rules or anything, but when there's proper disaster like we've experienced this season, let's say in the mountains of North Carolina, maybe there should be some kind of hey, we're granting the team an eligibility waiver this season. Or am I mistaken? And maybe that can happen.
Well, I would argue that applies more for a team like App State, located over there. UNC is located a lot closer to Raleigh. It was less affected by a lot of this flooding. But, I mean, that's just something that I'm not necessarily sure if that holds over. It's something that the NCAA would definitely have to consider. I mean, East Tennessee was very heavily affected. Knoxville seemed to make it out fine. But, I'm sure those kids have a lot of family and friends, if they grew up in and around that area, part of, that, suffered through a lot of that type of stuff. And, it's not my call as to whether they could just kind of wave a magic wand and say, hey, we know what your team suffered.
Well, of course it's not our call. But let's suspend suspend disbelief.
But I'm not even sure how to approach that.
Okay.
Just because I mean, really, you try to account and plan out for a lot of freak things in football and in life in general, and sometimes it doesn't matter how much planning goes into it. When the moment arises, even if you are prepared, there's still a moment of panic and having taking some time and really not having any idea of what you're going to do.
Well, the saying, right? Man makes plans and God laughs. Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate. You have that. You have Max Johnson go down in the first game. A focal point leader of the team, and a guy who himself was jacked for the opportunity. You have Tylee Craft passing away after a heroic fight against cancer. I mean, as you talk about just the book getting thrown at a group of young men in terms of what they're having to deal with. That adversity is. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine it. Just a really tough set of circumstances. With that being said, I will commend Mac Brown for how he's gone about um, just addressing these things. You've spoken about it very publicly. You saw his emotion last weekend talking about his former player who passed away, and I think that for and for some you would hope that your coach is that emotionally involved in things and stuff like that, but it would be easy for a coach in a major football program to shut the cameras out, shut the public out, and dealing with those sorts of things,
Yeah.
and he hasn't done that to an extreme extent. I will commend him for that. um, there's just a lot going on that sucks, like
Yeah,
not to be a doomer,
But if
but
but
that's just
but but
yeah,
if you're gonna have that stuff happen, thank God it is Mac Brown that's
yeah.
there.
Hmm.
And
yeah.
thank God he's still
When
coaching. That we haven't
established
like,
his,
yeah,
um, yeah, I definitely agree. Just because bad things happen to everybody. It's really important that in those moments you have a great support system around you, because having that extra shoulder to put some weight on just makes the world for everybody. Um,
absolutely. Well, that's
but
sad. Let's move on from that. Let's get back to the show being fun, boys.
yeah, well, and you know what's incredibly fun,
Jaden Daniels.
Hayden? Well, he is pretty fun. Held the L this past Sunday, but is to be expected facing against two-time MVP. But what's really fun is seeing two military schools in the top 25 for the first time since
Yeah.
1960. Army and Navy are in the top 25. I just want to throw this question out there because it's been discussed on numerous platforms, but Army and Navy meet for the annual Army Navy game the week after
Yes.
conference championships are played.
Yes.
This is another kind of special situation where
Yep.
a conference or maybe an overarching body like the NCAA would have to make a decision when it comes to how they want to play this out, because if the way the American Conference Championship works is they play whoever the number one seed is, they host the game. Um, you know, when was the last time either Army or Navy hosted a game against the other? That would be kind of a crazy situation.
Yeah.
But
I can't even imagine the
Didn't they
West
play the
Point
COVID
fans
year
in
game?
Annapolis.
I thought they played the COVID year game at the school that was up that year in the who is the home and road rotation. I could be wrong, but aside from that,
very well might have. I definitely I missed it that
I'm gonna
season.
Google it.
But
Maybe I'm just
normally
making
they
that
do.
up.
Yeah, but normally, like I was saying, the Army Navy game is it is a standalone thing. The week after conference championships are played. Now, if the score of that game,
Yeah,
for
it
whatever
was at
reason, by
Army.
all okay, well, if the score for that game, by all accounts, determines if a different team were to get in that conference championship game, right now, like a North Texas team sits at 2-0 in the conference, 5-1 overall. Tulane's 2-0 in the conference. Charlotte's 2-0 in the conference right now. Um, if the outcome of the Army Navy game, for whatever reason, were to decide which one of those teams would make the conference championship, the other one being left out of it, um, I'd be very hard pressed to see the American Conference not make at least some decision when it comes to that. Who knows? I mean, you have all the TV right deals and everything planned out, but in my personal opinion, I would just say, hey, screw the conference championship, playing it in West Point this season. We're just going to play it at Lincoln Financial Field. So that's just my 2 cents on that matter.
Well, and I heard somebody discussing, whether or not they would even play the Army-Navy game if they met in the championship.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying just
Oh,
make
yeah.
the standalone game the championship game rather than play on conference championship week.
It's supposed to be. Is it not? I thought it was supposed to be at FedEx Field this year.
I'm trying to get those guys away from FedEx Field. I don't want them to play there. I'd rather play in Philadelphia.
Don't subject them to that. They've got to go tour the crappiest places in the world on forward operating stations and things like that in the U.S. military after their playing career. Like, at least let them go somewhere nicer than Philadelphia for their big game. Okay, like let's. I'm not saying FedEx Field is a Taj Mahal.
Is Landover, Maryland that much? Maybe they should just play in Baltimore.
That's fair, because because we started this show and I was in Landover, like 3 minutes into this show, just driving through Landover. I kid you not, guys. I muted my mic because somebody knocked on my window and handed me my license plate. So no, Landover's not nicer than Philadelphia. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm being silly.
Yes, and there's an argument to be made that Baltimore might not be nicer than either of them. Just a matter of perspective when it comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. Either way, they care more about the football game.
Yeah.
So, hey, I mean, look, if it gets to that point where the American Conference has to step in some way or another, I'm very curious to see what happens. They're probably, biting their nails right now, trying to figure out what they're going to do if somehow they get into mid-November and neither one of these teams have lost. Because, I mean, shoot, if they both stay undefeated,
they do have Notre Dame.
Forward,
so you got that. Okay. But if they both lose that and they're both,
but that's still not a conference game, Will.
Oh, that's a great. Oh, that is a great point
still because be undefeated in the conference
champion. Yes, that's a good point.
So,
man, and then you got right. You're exactly right.
Well, it's not a guarantee Notre Dame wins that game against either one of them, really, the way that both of those teams have been playing to this point in the season.
And the way Marcus Freeman has a penchant for dropping to inferior opponents.
Yeah. What's really going to suck is if both of these teams somehow, by the grace of God, go undefeated, play each other in a conference championship game, and then they both get left out because the AP voters and the playoff people just want to see Ashton Genty just stand up like a madman and run the ball in the first round.
I wouldn't mind seeing that because he's so entertaining. But
yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, and it brings up the larger discussion about the parity in the sport. People have commented on this. I think it's fantastic. But
love it.
Yeah, and you got other group of 5 teams that are in the mix. Liberty's really good again, with Caden Salter, one of the best quarterbacks in mid-major football, as we knew. But now they're still pretty strong team. But
UNLV is still very good, even despite their quarterback deciding he's just gonna walk off the field.
And Syracuse is. I mean, is Syracuse good?
I mean,
Kyle McCord Co.
They are what the record was.
Yeah, but I mean, they're a very solid football team.
They're winning football games.
Someone mentioned the other day that the problem with last year's Ohio State team was not Kyle McCord. It was the fact that, Ryan Day is inept. Totally fair point. Because Will Howard has come in and pretty much been more or less exactly what Kyle McCord was last year.
It's almost as if he can only run the plays that his coach calls.
Yeah, I mean, you have some extremely talented wide receivers out there that can go up and pretty much make any catch on the planet. You got Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, but it all comes down to Will Howard just pulling the ball and not having the mindset to get down and be able to kick a field goal. Sucks for them, I guess. Shout out to Dan Lanning for getting that big win, first big win of his career as a Big Ten head coach, beating the Buckeyes in his first season as part of that conference. Huge for the program. They play on a Friday night after that big win. Congratulations. You get the trap game at Purdue immediately following your big win against Ohio State.
So by transitive property
At Purdue,
and
yes.
transitive wins and losses, will the
Yes.
upset now be delegated to Oregon now that Oregon beat Ohio State? That is the question, guys.
It's very possible. Just passing that right over. Yeah, I mean, bull her up, man. I would love to see them be competitive. They played I don't know if either of you saw their game against Illinois this past weekend, but it was
I caught
a
the
very
highlights
fun
after.
football game. I saw pretty much the entire fourth quarter. Really, just fantastic football overall. So Oregon has shown at points this season that they are beatable. I don't think they're going to lose to Purdue, but to that point, again, you never really know how things are going to play out.
I didn't think Alabama was going to lose to Vanderbilt.
Circles around folks in big 2024.
Yeah,
who would have thought?
Hey, I don't know. I felt that was when Illinois decided to bring him in. I was like, well, he did fine at Arkansas. I mean, he wasn't anything special. But since he's arrived on that campus, he's done a really solid job getting them back to being at least somewhat relevant football program.
Hardy, I remember you singing Brett
this season
Bielema's praises in like 2022, saying that like you really thought he was going to be able to make it happen here and get something going. It turns out you were spot on that. This is above expectations.
Yeah, definitely above expectations. With a team like Illinois, really the Big Ten, there's, you've got Ohio State, Michigan, now Oregon. There's kind of a little bit of a power vacuum in that kind of middle ground. Illinois is trying to make a name for themselves this season, especially because Lincoln Riley refuses to win football games, especially any football games where his opponent has a number next to their name.
Their trademark goof yet. Even though they did try, there was an effort, but that didn't happen yet.
They did try. Well, I mean, a lot of that was. I mean, I still cannot believe USC lost that game. But nonetheless, getting to see a USC loss means I get to see Cowherd on Monday talk about how upset he is that USC did not get a win, because that is just an enjoyable part of my week.
Yeah, my happiest days are the ones where Cowherd is upset. Speaking of members of the media, speaking of members of the media getting upset. Oh?
Yes.
We assume Aiden will be back with us momentarily. Traffic and all that.
Yes, he is dealing with it. Yeah, he's definitely going through it right now. We can just go ahead and get to this next point. In a conference that a lot of people were very disregarding this season, two teams have stood out so far in the Big 12, being the Iowa State Cyclones and the BYU Cougars. Kalani Sitake, Matt Campbell, both of them have been really phenomenal since they both stepped on their respective campuses. Both of them sit atop of the Big 12 standings. It's not a given that either one of them will make it even to the conference championship. But is there any sort of thought process that goes into, I mean, a lot of people joke like Alabama is getting set up to play Georgia in a rematch game in the first round of the playoffs just to go lose to Iowa State or BYU in the Cotton Bowl. Like, a lot of people don't really know like how good these Big 12 teams are. I'm an Iowa State advocate at this point in the season. Rocco Beck was Big 12 Freshman of the Year. They got a lot of really talented receivers, talented running backs on that side of the field. I think they're going to be competing long term for that Big 12 championship. But Will, do you see any other teams in the Big 12 kind of making a push to get back into this picture?
I could. I just think Iowa State is kind of the real deal at this point. I mean, who was a better coaching hire for their specific program than, Matt Campbell in the decade of the 2010s? I mean, I can sit here and wait a long time, and the reality is, I think you'd be waiting a long time to come up with somebody that fits the bill quite like him. I mean, a guy that took a program that I'm not even talking about middling. I'm not even talking about slightly
It's pretty
irrelevant.
below
Bad.
average.
You're talking 2-10, 3-9, 4-8 is a good year, and now
Yeah,
he's
but thankfully pulling off upsets against Oklahoma State to knock them out of the BCS championship.
that is
In
true,
true Big 12 form.
and creating a lot of questions and debates. But those are not the business of this show. Um, I think Iowa State's for real this year, and I think it's similar to 2020 where they pulled off that win against Oklahoma, and ended up not being that win was a fluke. They played really well, and they won a New Year's Six game. They went like what 8-2, 9-2, something like that year.
Yeah, Wynn played in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah,
Got that win. Really big win for that program. Was probably arguably the best win in program history. They've never had a 10-win season. Never had a 10-win regular season in their school history. This year definitely looks like it could be well on that road. Look, just taking a quick look at their schedule. It's very favorable. They play Texas. They play UCF this weekend. Play Texas Tech. They go to Kansas, who has been very disappointing. Bringing Jalen Daniels back, I thought they would be a lot better than they are. They play Cincinnati. The last 2 games of the season are their toughest test. You got to go on the road to play Utah, and then they get a ranked K-State team with Avery Johnson and co. Coming to Jack Trice Stadium for Farmageddon. It's just, it's one of the things that you look at the schedule and it plays out pretty much to a point where both, really BYU included, both of those teams are kind of looking like they could match up in that Big 12 title.
Yeah, I'm really happy for Kalani Sitake. I love his energy.
Awesome.
And
Good dude.
BYU has been a good team over the last several years. I think, and especially in that 2020 season, very memorable games that year. We will never forget Mormons versus Mullets. Absolutely phenomenal, just tremendous.
We'll never forget.
I think
time
that
to be
was what
alive.
our country needed at the time, quite frankly.
It did. Yeah.
It really did. It was.
Will forever be enshrined in my mind. Getting to see 2 of the greater Group of 5 quarterbacks. I know technically BYU was an independent at that moment in time, but still to that point, 2 of the better non-Power 5 quarterbacks facing off against each other that season. And it played out perfectly, exactly the way that you could have imagined it played out. We saw a lot of chaos, a lot of really good football, a lot of quarterbacks showing up and showing out. And BYU's been able to maintain that level since that point. Struggled a little bit first year in the Big 12, as to be expected, but Coastal since then has kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit.
Man, and NC State's terrible. I'm sorry, Hardy. They are a bad football team this year, and I'm very surprised by that. They opened the season ranked. They got an infusion at quarterback from a player that is a very talented college football player. I mean, even if on paper, Coastal never reached the highs again from that pandemic season that they had. Grayson McCall was still really good, and then you had, of course, the injury recently that wasn't good, but it's like the team just, I don't know what's wrong with them. Like I guess they're just bad.
No, it's more so to do with the fact that since Grayson McCall got knocked out of the Birmingham Bowl, even leading up to that game, the injury history for him has just been horrible. Missed half of last season, with just a really, really grueling concussion. Has had ankle injuries, different things just piling up. And for a guy that was really talented, that I had a lot of faith would one day be a very good Power Five quarterback, the injury bug has really caught up with him. At
And it
this point
sucks
in
because
the season,
everything else
yeah,
he
I mean,
does
at this
so
point in the
well.
season, he hasn't. I mean, he's thrown 80 passes for 518 yards. C.J. Bailey taking over that job, has already eclipsed 1,000. McCall has just not now. And when they brought him in, they were like, "Hey, this guy's going to be the starter. He's going to be able to lead us to a possible, ACC championship berth, all this type of stuff." And as we've seen from a number of quarterbacks, some of them that we've talked about this season, the injury bug definitely reared its head again. But unlike a Cam Rising, there's little to no discussion about whether he's going to return to college football. With the injury history both of them have had, I'm surprised they both don't just hang it up.
Call it a day, yeah. Because the thing that you feel for Grayson McCall with, especially, is like everything else about his career so far has looked like it was going to work out for him. That he actually he seemed like he was developing in the way he was supposed to, and it's the things you can't control. It's the way the ball bounces, and it's one of the things that's so tantalizing about sports, and it's why we love it. Is sometimes it really just is about the right guy getting lucky with the right opportunity, and this is the other side of that coin. Sometimes it's really disappointing to watch somebody that you really enjoy seeing flourish finally start to wilt.
Yeah, it's been pretty disappointing, but nevertheless, got to pick things up and keep going, right?
You do,
and that's part of it. And injuries are one of the worst parts. But sometimes it happens. I mean, baseball too. I mean, I use that as an example. There's a lot of guys who you look at and could have been something if they never had a lot of injuries. I think about what would have happened if RG3 still had 2 functioning knees after his rookie season. Yeah. I mean, you surround yourself with just what ifs, and it can kind of take away from your actual enjoyment of a team or a sport if you let it.
But then at the same time, sometimes the injury bug really does just go away. John Allen, for example, I know this is probably poor timing in this example, given that we just found out yesterday or 2 days ago that he's out for the season with a torn left pec. Coming out, he fell in the draft to Washington, where he was at 16, I think. He was really talked about as a top 5, potentially, definitely a top 10 prospect, but everybody was so worried about that shoulder and the injury history with the shoulder in particular. And then he went to Washington, and it's just simply not been an issue. It just has worked out for him. It's finally got right. It's settled. It sucks to see the torn pec now, but it's not related to that lingering shoulder problem that kept coming back up for him.
Man, and I thought the Washington defense maybe could catch a break this year with, the addition of Bobby Wagner and all that. I mean, I still love watching them play, even after all this time. And he's not on the Seahawks anymore. Yeah. So as a Broncos fan, it's a little bit more palatable to root for the guy. But, you guys can't have too many nice things.
It feels very similar to the London Fletcher arrival of the 2000s. Or maybe that was early 2010s. I can't quite remember, but I think it was 2009. Just kind of veteran guy that still has all the energy and is still dependable and is still just a consistent presence, in addition to being a talented player and, in his 30s running around and trying to lead the team in tackles. Yeah. But I think the thing that Washington's really missing, the thing that's not coming together for them, it's really just the back end. It's the secondary. And I think it's some interesting decisions that were made in free agency. You entered the season with $25 million more to spend. You could have spent it on 1 or 2 rentals at the position. And I think the same thing, with letting Kendall Fuller walk. You should have had more veteran presence in the back end of this defense, and they just didn't.
Yeah, it's been a struggle for that Commanders team up to this point, and it's just something that now that you have your quarterback, you can start to address some of the other things in the draft. There's going to be guys available. It's just like anything, like any GM, it's just a matter of what your scouts do. Are you able to hit on some of those players?
And now I think it almost becomes a question, Hardy. Do you start looking at the draft next year where you have 9 picks and 4 in the top 100 again? or and you, like I said, you're sitting on 25 million right now. You're going to have some insane cap number next year. Do you start
Or do you
making
go out and make
plays
a
before
move
the
at the
trend
deadline?
line? Yeah, that's I think what the
Um,
question here is, because you're 2-3 years ahead of schedule, and time again in the
yeah,
modern era of the NFL, we've seen the consistent formula
it's
is
well, it's
win on the rookie contract for your
it's
quarterback.
been quarterbacks on rookie contracts are able to make really long playoff pushes because you're able to pay all the other guys in the
Exactly.
building. If I would rather shoot myself in the head than this happen. But if the Saints lose tomorrow night to the Denver Broncos, um, I imagine Dennis Allen should be fired. Should have been fired a long time ago, but nonetheless, he's still the coach right now. If they lose to Sean Payton in the Superdome, the night that Drew Brees gets inducted into the Saints Hall of Fame and gets his number in the rafters, I would be sending Dennis Allen packing. Mickey Loomis and co. would probably be reevaluating this roster going forward. The New Orleans Saints fire sale could happen. If a guy
That
like
roster's
Marshawn, if a guy like Marshawn Lattimore is available for trade, again, I would rather die than have that happen, seeing as he is my favorite player on the roster at this moment in time.
but
What
you
would you
need
be
to
willing
start
to give
looking
up for
ahead.
him?
I think
I
I
know.
think I'm willing to trade for like these 1 or 2 year rentals. Just try to make a push and win now, because you're 4-2. You're more than likely going to win the East because the division is bad this year. The Cowboys are frauds. The Eagles need to fire their coach, and the Giants, honestly, Hardy might
Don't
be the
look
second
bad.
best. They might be the second best team in the division. So like I think
Yeah.
you're so far ahead of schedule on your rebuild that like you need to be willing to make an adjustment on the fly and say no, we're going to deal. To hell. I mean, if it's only a third round pick for Amari Cooper, well, Cleveland, what are you doing with Denzel Ward?
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be guys available at the deadline. Some teams are looking around. I don't think Washington wants to even think about approaching that Jalen Ramsey contract, but he's probably going to be asking for a trade this offseason, especially if Tua doesn't come back and that team is kind of middling. Um,
You could even look
but
at
he's
going after
old.
Fuller because he went to Miami and then Tua got hurt. He was trying to be on a winning team, and look what's going on back home, buddy.
Yeah, and you look at there's I mean, in every trade deadline, there's always going to be some big time moves. We've already seen two huge name wide receivers get moved already in Amari Cooper and Devontae Adams. If I haven't seen anything that happened today, don't hate me for it. But you know, I haven't seen anything that's really stood out
I
today
don't think
so
I
far.
have either.
But the trade deadline is rapidly approaching, so it's just a matter of what these teams are deciding to do. Do they want to try to make a playoff push, or are they going to, I don't know, sit back and just kind of embrace the rebuild? Once you get into the halfway point of the season, that's where teams really start making those kind of decisions. Teams that are on the fence are either going to, yeah, are either going to. I mean, they got to figure out what they're going to do, not just for the short term, but for the long term as well.
You're absolutely right. And Adam Peters comes straight out of that San Francisco way of doing things, and prior to that New England way of doing things. So my instinct is to say that that's probably what he's going to do. I think he's going to keep his cards close to his vest. I think he's going to let the moves come to him, sort of like with Jahan Dotson. I'm not saying
Yeah,
that it's an apples to apples comparison. I'm not saying that it wasn't 3 months earlier or 2 months earlier before the season started, but what, 8-9 weeks ago, Adam Peters got the same thing for Jahan Dotson that Cleveland just got for Amari Cooper. So honestly,
yeah, exactly.
yes, I'm sitting here clamoring, itching, crawling in my skin, not because of the poison sumac, but more because I feel like I want you to go make some moves at the deadline and make a push,
Try to put
especially
this team in
because
a
if
winning
you
position.
right, and if you do that, if you make the effort, if you swing the bat, I think this fan base, I think you even more so than you've had them come out of the droves, or come out of hiding in droves. You'll see them more and more like, oh, you're here, it's working, and you're trying to do even better, not just resting on your laurels. I think that would be huge for the fan base.
Yeah. Just taking a look at the New Orleans Saints, really a lot of the players that a couple of the guys I imagine could be involved in the fire sale. Chase Young he's got on an expiring contract. Someone will probably take a swing on him.
I'll give you a 7th rounder for him.
I mean, that's sure. Whatever. But that he's one of the guys that was definitely be up for that. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu's kind of old. I don't know if anyone would really be willing to trade for him.
I think a veteran, like an older guy.
Lattimore's they're definitely going to get some calls about him. I don't think really anyone on this offense aside from Chris Olave, maybe Alvin Kamara would warrant some calls. He is on an expiring contract this season. The Saints have not decided whether or not they're going to pay him long term.
I mean,
if they're going to rebuild,
if I'm Alvin Kamara, I'm not interested.
Yeah, well,
I mean, how much does he have left in the tank?
I'm not exactly sure. But if you're an Alvin Kamara and you're players generally speaking have two goals: win at the highest level or make a lot of money.
Yep.
Sometimes those things work together, but a lot of times they do not. Guys will take big contracts at middling franchises in order to get paid. We see what Calvin Ridley's doing in Tennessee right now. But it's just a matter of what these teams are going to do. Excited to be in the Superdome tomorrow night. Big night. I'm not sure which one of these head coaches I'm going to boo more. Probably going to be Dennis Allen, though. What if? Who?
You and Will?
No, we are not. No, he ended up not getting tickets for it. I'm going with my dad, so should be
that'll be fun. Okay, yeah. So you're on takeover duty for that game. You're not tweeting from your personal Twitter. Just let's make sure we're getting that out there now.
Just tweets fly. Just let the tweets fly from the BTG account.
Absolutely.
I can probably make that happen.
Let them pour with the beers a little bit.
Yeah, definitely need to make that happen. But hey, do you have anything else? And we can go ahead and wrap up and get out of here.
I got 12 more miles of highway already. That's what I got. So yeah, no, I think we've hit what we needed to hit tonight. No, one more thing we got to touch on. Shame on you, Jerry Jones. You know better. You know you're a better human than that. And you're choosing to not. And it's asinine. Shame on you. That's more than every other member of the media, justifiably so, has today. Hardy, I don't know how much sports content you listen to throughout your day before we do our show in the East. Spend a lot of time on station.
Yeah.
What was that?
Kind of cutting out. I do know the reference that you were talking about with Jerry Jones. His comments said to the media over the past couple of days. People asking him, asking him real questions about whether some of the roster moves he made in the offseason. He's like, I will find someone else to sit in that chair and ask me questions I want to hear. Pretty much. I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly what he said, but that's essentially the gist of what it came down to. And I mean, come on, you're better than that. He might not be, if you want, but I like to at least pretend that he is.
I mean, we saw the pictures from Little Rock in the 50s, so I mean, let's not put the cart before the horse here. So
fair enough.
All right. With that,
we're gonna call it.